All right, I'm just getting the slides queued up here. Amelia, look good? Okay, great. So I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction and context on this topic, and then segue into the real reason you're all here, which is our wonderful group of panelists who are really the experts on this topic. So we had met prior to go over kind of what's important to them with regards to this topic. So I try to kind of like educate around those points that they want to hit on so we can kind of all be on the same page. There's a lot of people on today. It has a growing list of 250 plus. I see the number keeps going up. So there's all sorts of experience levels, right? People that would like to work more with veterans, who maybe would like to work more with veterans who have this experience that we're talking about today, and then those that already do, right? So we try to just set the framework to bring us all together, get us on the same page, and then go deeper into the topic through the panelists as the best education platform that we can offer. So thank you for joining. My name is Aynisa Leonardo. I've been in the field for almost 20 years now, and have had the pleasure and honor of working with many service members, veterans, active duty and retired, and first responders, and have learned the most by doing that work. Not by reading textbooks, not by reading articles, although that helps, but by doing the work hands-on. So we try to offer these panels because it really is the best way to educate firsthand, right? So I, again, had the pleasure of working clinically with veterans for years and years and really learning that way. And we understand that not everybody has that experience. And like we want to kind of bring you that in the best way that we can. So these are offered throughout the year. NASW is fantastic. If you check out, what they post as part of the Veterans Mental Health Training Initiative, there's all sorts of wonderful topics throughout the year. So this one was one that was suggested, recommended, requested by attendees and by people on the veteran committee. And so we want to bring light to it, something that's maybe not discussed. So I'm going to give the information, and then as you see on here, this is the list of panelists that we'll segue into. So a few things that we talked about, and when we talk about like what is a veteran student, right, and what that looks like, and I think it's such a funny, we say veterans in higher education because I think it's a more accurate way of describing. You think of student, just the word student alone, what comes to mind? You might think of somebody who's maybe 20 years old, just starting their life, trying to figure out what they want to quote unquote be when they grow up. And then if you think of a veteran, usually don't think of somebody that is in that type of category, that type of profile. So when we put those two words together, veteran student, it's kind of a unique category of individuals. And as far as what their needs are and how to support them and the way that educational institutes support them, it's important to kind of understand and look at. So a few statistics, education points. The GI Bill is something you should be familiar with, and we'll talk more about that in the panel as well. But the GI Bill basically offers educational opportunities to veterans, which is why there are many who enroll in education, higher education, after service. So it's a wonderful benefit that has been offered, and some of the statistics indicate, and I list some of them out. Not that I love statistics, but we need them as a frame of reference sometimes. There's a high number of veterans that after service do enroll in an educational institution and go on to get a second career, really, or third career for some. So once many colleges, universities took note of this, right, and developed different types of areas of support, knowing that there were veterans that were enrolling and that their needs were a little bit different than maybe their civilian students that they were used to having in their systems. So there's a huge potential for veterans in the education system to do really, really well. And yes, there are a few that I've worked with clinically, but even more than that, I've just had some really great colleagues and friends who have served and went on to become teachers, lawyers, doctors. I mean, amazing, like second careers that I was just like, wow, you already served the country, did 10 years, 15 years of service, and now you're re-enrolling, starting your life again. Very ambitious, right? I feel like if that were me, I'd find a way to retire. I'd be exhausted, right? So it's really impressive to look at. And I think veterans are just uniquely positioned, as it says here, right, for motivation within these settings, right? Because they went through what they went through with regards to their service. And keep in mind that's diverse. It could be anything, right? What that is. And it's always good to ask, what was your service like? And not assume. And putting that phase, that chapter of their life behind them to an extent, and then reinvesting their efforts somewhere else. They're positioned uniquely. Let's put it that way, versus let's say the 20-year-old or the 25-year-old who's just starting their life, right? So it looks different, and it feels different. Veterans are also they're coming from a place of service already. So within these institutes, they usually dedicate towards service, right? Whether it's within the academic institute or beyond that. So serving the community, being engaged, being a support, on a few different levels. You can oftentimes find a veteran student who really wants to be involved within the institute and after that as well. So here and I pulled some of these quotes online, agents for social good, right? I loved that phrase. So a lot of veterans are agents for social good. That's why they joined, or it was a part of their service in some capacity. All right, so this is just more on the GI Bill here. So where's the quote that I'm looking for? In 2018, so a lot of the data, if you look it up, is captured around like 2017 to 2020. So there's still data that's formulating that's like more current, but it does give a good snapshot. So 650,000 veterans in that year used military benefits to pursue higher education. And that number has remained consistent and or grown, actually. So there's a very high percentage, right? And some of the demographics here that I just thought were interesting. So majority of veteran students were between the age of 24 and 40. Only 15% were age 18 to 23. So you're looking at, again, a demographic and a disposition that is different. 47% of student veterans were parents and were married. Right. So like I know when I was in undergrad, graduate school, all the way through, I was not a parent or married, right? And I think a lot of people, I mean, I don't want to, again, assume there are people that do get married young and have children, and but many civilians do not, right? So when you look at that, student demographic, the majority of, and there are people that go for second careers that do not have a military background and are, married and have kids and they go back to school. But veterans, the majority of them fit into that demographic. So it's good to consider that. 73% were male, 27% were female. This kind of breaks down like ethnicity wise. And first generation college students, 62% are first generation college students, which I thought was really interesting. Large number. I like visuals. So this kind of paints the picture of what I'm describing, right? So what makes them unique, right? Many of them have a family to support or are involved in a family system, have jobs, delayed enrollment. Some have deployments where they enroll in school and then are activated and have to deploy. There's part-time enrollment. There are many that are single parents, and the ones that are completely after service, retired, converted over. Service-connected disabilities are important to be mindful of, whether those are medical, physical, psychological, but there may be challenges that they are, working on and managing while looking at this pursuit of their next phase in life. So there are some, there's many of these that we do, and there's a slide that I have on the one on just military competency that it posts the question, why did you join, right? Why did you join the military? And it lists out like, I don't know, 20 bullet points of reasons why. And I came up with that list by asking many veterans, like, why did you join? And then I would just type it together because it's not the type of answer you could find on Google. And some did say for the benefits, and some even said for the education benefits. I had no other way to pursue my future and my series of careers, service being one of them, but the end goal being the GI Bill and obtaining another career after service, right? So for some, that's even the reason why. So it's really important to look at, and for many people, it is a component of their service, even if it's not while they are in, it's in their mind as something that is important to them afterwards. 92% of service members in this national survey in 2015 said that they strongly agree that higher education is a crucial component in navigating the post-service transition. Very high percentage there. So another kind of asset, I'll say, of veteran students is just their diversity and their diverse skill set. So characteristics like adaptability, self-discipline, leadership, management skills, work ethic, teamwork, professionalism, resilience, and mental fortitude. Quite a list, right? And that list goes on and on. But military training and military experience does promote many of these things, right? In the values and the requirements really to serve. So it's not just the technical skills that they are able to learn, but some values as well that are rolled into that experience that will likely carry over into their next chapter in education and work. All right, so almost done, maybe 5 minutes or less more of this part, and then we'll segue over. And I like to say that so the panelists are queued up and ready. So challenges. Let's talk about challenges, and they're going to go more into that too, because the benefits are important. Equally, the challenges are, because again, we want to support this this population, right? Student veterans are generally less likely to be able to invest time and energy on activities that are not essential to the completion of their course as a result of other responsibilities that we had mentioned before. Many report a difficulty transitioning their learning style, right? And from the military style, even just of learning, but also the way that the hierarchy is set up and what they're used to a civilian learning environment. And I like to always have like a reference in mind, and a very good friend of mine spoke very openly with me about this when he was going through it, with a lot of expletives mixed in there, because he had great experience, was highly successful in the Army, and then transitioning over to, he was like, I can't believe I'm sitting in these classrooms now and the things I have to tolerate, and I have to be patient, and I really want the career, and has moved on to have a wonderful career, but some frustrations attached to the learning environment. And it's not that professors or the administration in colleges and universities can necessarily change that, but we're looking at ways to support it, right? And just understand it, that veteran student might be going through different frustrations and challenges related to that just difference in environment, vast difference in environment for many, right? The fact that many of them relocate, there's frequent moves, which make anything challenging. I know another close friend of mine is a spouse, and she really was trying to get her social work degree and had a lot of trouble, because if you probably all know, this is very relatable, actually. I'm glad I thought of this example. Certain licenses and degrees are restricted by state. So she would get so far in getting that licensure, and then her husband would be relocated, and then she'd kind of have to not start all the way from the beginning, but a few steps back in order to continue to pursue her social work degree and license. And she was able to in the end, but it took her, my goodness, probably 4 times as long to get and achieve. And it wasn't due to her incompetency at all. She's awesome. But it took her longer because of those relocations. So that could happen to spouses, family members, and service members as well. It also affects their qualification for in-state tuition rates and things like that, the benefits that come with a lot of institutions that are kind of internal to that state. All right. And of course, the struggles that many veterans unfortunately face with mental health, and the transitional and reintegration struggles. Again, not everyone does, but there are relatively high rates of just mental health challenges that come up, some of which are temporary and related to, hopelessness or trauma or situational issues that they're going through, and then some that are more lifelong, where they're like, okay, I need to learn how to manage my, depression or anxiety or anything that they might have as a lingering effect of their service, and possibly something that was pre-existing for some, right? So relatively high percent percentage reported suicidal thoughts, which I think is important to note because it is, there are risk areas for certain populations, right? And if we don't talk about mental health when we're talking about veterans, then we're kind of missing the mark there. So just important if there is, involvement in, let's say, a resource center in an institution to have a mental health component of that. I know many who have accessed that, and it's been helpful to them. All right, so a couple quotes again. I think there's about 2 slides left. Speaking to the feeling of isolation that can occur to a veteran who is enrolled in school, basically. Feeling like this gentleman references the feeling like they are isolated, not part of a larger community, stuck in the mindset that they have to white knuckle through, and the importance of institutions creating spaces for student veterans to have an outlet and an area for support. And, he references staffing military resource centers, right? So now we're moving on to like, what do we do? How do we support them? So resource centers are a big, there's a big call for them within these types of settings. So again, there's a lot of transferable skills, but in that transference of skills, sometimes there's speed bumps along the way. So moving from military to civilian skills, navigating what that looks like, filling in future goals. Like some veterans will enroll in school and they're like, I don't really know what I want to do, right? And that's, again, many of us might relate to that. At a younger age prior to any sort of career. But just because a veteran student is 45, 50 years old even, it's good to have that in mind that that person might be super motivated, very engaged, and really want that next step, but they don't have all those blanks filled in yet as far as what it looks like. Integrating skills from service, and post-service, and that's a challenge in itself for many. It can be very overwhelming, so it's good to support that. From an empowerment model, like strength-based, let's pull from the strengths and the areas of motivation, like what are the areas of interest. And I know we have a diverse panel here, so the implications between like active duty, guard, reserve, and what the educational benefits look like is important to consider as well. So for many, they are seeking that sense of purpose. So it is big shoes to fill when compared to their prior experience, right? Filling in what's next, what's my role going to be, my identity is going to be wrapped into this, and many people of service have a very strong identity built into their service, right? Not everyone, but for many, that's there. So there can be a setup and an expectation that then turns into disappointment or frustration or just uncertainty, right? So it's good to be mindful of that and just, as we support this reintegration process. With all of this in mind, very important to check our biases and approach veteran students with open communication. Approach all veterans with open communication and avoiding assumptions. A couple of our panelists did mention the importance of allowing for self-identification. So instead of saying, oh, well, you're a veteran and now you're a student, so that means XYZ, right? Asking and allowing that to kind of breathe and allowing them to navigate the process is most helpful. Getting to know them for who they are, right? Asking qualitative questions. We get wrapped up in this idea of like the broken veteran, right? Versus the heroic veteran, right? And there's a majority or somewhere in between and don't really want to be identified as either. So diversity and just supporting that diversity and inclusion of all veteran experiences, whatever that looks like. And it's really basic skills when you break that down. It's just being respectful and compassionate and open to communication. So in order to walk that kind of balance and that fine line, showing interest in the veterans' experiences without singling them out. So it's kind of like that, oh, like there's a veteran in the room. Let's be mindful of that. Let's talk about it. Hey, let's call that person out even in different ways. Like that might feel like something that is honoring them, but for many, they don't want that. They appreciate that there's a recognition. But that singling out maybe is not, the most recommended thing to do. So we're going to go through this pretty quick, and we're going to rely on the panel to help us formulate a real list here. This was pulled from online. I'm not going to lie. Many of my slides are not, but I looked up a lot of suggestions on how to support veteran students and veterans in higher education, and I pulled the list I like the best. So the culture of trust and connectedness across the campus, ensuring consistent support from campus leadership. So you want it to come from the top down, right? Implementing systems, and really this is just that early intervention model, right? You want to be able to flag areas so veterans receive all of these supports beforehand and during, as opposed to when the crisis happens. Like, hey, this isn't a fit for me. Now what do I do? We want to support it ahead of time. So to create that system of support, centralize campus efforts for all veterans, collaborating with local communities and organizations. So we don't expect institutions to internally build all of these areas of support, but referral systems are important as well. If a veteran comes forward with needs, being able to refer them, and that comes with collaboration and involvement within the community. Collect information, collect data, right? We encourage universities to do so in order to assess where those need areas are. Professional development and education for faculty and staff, of course, and then longer term systems of sustainability and best practices for veteran students as well. Career advisors, there was a lot of information on that. Somebody mentioned the importance of rolling this into offboarding within the military. So we talked about like what can we do better, and we're going to delve into that more in just a moment. But it's good to think about because this is like a growing topic, right? And we want to evolve as the needs do for sure. So these are our panelists. Kat, I did add you on there, assuming that you might chime in here and there. But these are our panelists for today. A nice cross-section of experience here. So you're all in for a treat, and we always appreciate the panelists' willingness to do these. And it's really a lived experience that we're pulling from with all of them. So first, I just want to set the stage and ask the question, why is this panel important to you? Why did you join this panel? What are, some areas of veterans in higher education that you see as like strong points that you would want to talk about? In no particular order, whoever wants to go first. And again, thank you for being open.
Hello, everyone. Josiah Guthland here, Army veteran and president of Green Zone Allied Training. The reason I was excited to join this panel today is my goal working in higher education with supporting our veteran students is that the next generation of veterans have a better lived experience through their higher education experience than I did. During my time in higher education, I often had to hide my veteran identity, my veteran parts of me in order to sort of fit in on the communities that was a part of because they didn't have support systems in place. People just assumed I was, broken or the heroic sort of veteran, which I'm neither. And so because of these kinds of things, when I started working in higher education, I really had a love and support for veteran students so that their experience and hopefully some of the information that we can pass on to you today will improve the experience of the veteran students at your institution.
Aynisa, can we also, when we do these questions, can we start with Andy? Because she has a dubious internet connection.
Sure.
That's okay. So far, so good. So hi, I'm Andy. I'm the Director of Military and Veteran Higher Education Engagement and Transition at Fordham University. We have about almost 60 military connected students who are going for their master's in social work at Fordham. And we're looks like for this fall, we're going to be almost doubling those numbers. So for me, one of the reasons why I'm really passionate about being on this panel is veterans have so much to add to the classroom and to the social work community. As social workers, they have personally experienced a lot of things that can help a lot of people. And the more that we could support them and help them get through it and succeed, I think as a society, the better off we'll be. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Desiree Drinkdak. I am the director of the Veteran and Military Resource Center at Empire State University, which is part of the state university system. I am a military spouse, and so I say my two worlds collided. When I was, my husband was active duty and I was looking for a job. The Navy base down in Norfolk was the first place that I was able to find a job. And I think from there, once I was in military education, I never wanted to be anywhere else. And so for me, it's about supporting our veterans has been a passion my entire career. And I think it's really important for the discussion we're having today, because I do believe that we can do better supporting our veterans in higher education. I think some places do it really well. Some places we can work to fill the gaps to support our veterans. And so for me, it's a sort of a life and a work commitment to supporting veterans coming back to higher education.
Hi, my name is Tim Scott, and I served in the Army, and I'm currently a full-time social work professor at Central Connecticut State University. I was a clinical social worker for a number of years prior to that. And I have to say that I consistently have students come through our program, our department, our BSW and now our MSW program, who are veterans. And I really enjoy working, and I love working with veterans and supporting them through their journey, not only in becoming a social worker, which I think is, is this higher calling, and helping them, just supporting them as whole people, not just my students, right? And that's the important piece, is always how do we continually, how we should always continually humanize veterans, because we're systematically, perpetually dehumanized, not only in the military, but also the idea that we are veterans. And that's all we are. We're some monolithic group, and we're not complex human beings other than that. So yeah, so a holistic approach in my relationships with students in my role as a professor, but also in my interpersonal relationships, is the idea of always disrupting a lot of these myths or generalizations or assumptions about who we are. So I love doing these panels. I'm on the advisory committee for Veterans Mental Health Training Initiative too.
I'm Mark. I'm the research fellow with Student Veterans of America. I just want to say what a cool panel. I'm not a veteran. I'm not a veteran family member. I don't come from a higher education background. Shockingly, I come from a community mental health background. I spent 10 years doing clinical work there, working with veterans some, but being in the SVA role here, I find that we have, both internally at SVA and in general, so much information, so much data, so much resource about how to make that college experience better for our veterans, to highlight and support them and strengthen what they're already bringing to the table. So to be able to find that data, synthesize it, and get it out to people who can actually use it on the ground, I think that's a really helpful thing to be able to do. And so hopefully what we do on the SBA side is to be able to help you guys have the tools, the knowledge, the resources to be able to go out and support the people that are in your communities. So hopefully that's what we're going to be able to do.
Would you like me to hop in for a sec? Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Kat Dobbs. I am an outreach coordinator for Student Veterans of America. Mark gave you a little bit of a background of what we do at SVA, and he is absolutely incredible. Anytime I have any sort of research questions, I go directly to Mark, because I mean, he knows everything, and I am thoroughly convinced of that. I've also had the pleasure of meeting Andy just the other day down in Atlanta for one of our regional summits. And so at SVA, my role primarily is connecting with our student veteran organizations on the ground. I primarily oversee our chapters in the Southeast. So we put on several different events. I was just at an event down in Atlanta where I had the absolute pleasure of meeting Andy. She is fantastic. And I know there are a lot of people here that are up in the Northeast area. If your institution is looking at creating a potential student veteran organization, which is just I mean, when I was a student veteran, I found SVA through our student veteran organization, and it completely changed my life. And I am a firm advocate as one of the best ways that you can help your student veterans as they are going through higher education is just giving them that community where they can feel safe, seen, accepted, despite all of the differences within our service. I myself, I was in the Air National Guard out of the state of Ohio for 10 years. And my SVA chapter, we had dependents, we had spouses, we had people who were active duty. We had people like myself that were still guardsmen. And some of us, even while we were still going to school, were activated and still taking classes during that time. So our SVA chapter really became our rock and our way to really help us just keep being supported by our other people, because they knew it's like, you guys are doing great work. It was during COVID for me. So they're like, you know, keep going out there, keep kicking butt, if you will. And we've got you. We can hold the fort down. Anything that you need, we've got it. People sending us packages and things like that. So I highly recommend having a student veteran org. If you're looking to start one, feel free to reach out to me. I'll drop my email in the chat. For those of you who are at institutions in the Northeast, the individual that really oversees that area, his name is John Morris. I'll drop that in the chat as well. And if you have any other, for all of the other states on the call, feel free to just, hey, who oversees the chapters in this area? Just email me and I will connect you with them, and we can happily help you guys get your chapter started or get it up and running again if it was already there. Thanks.
All right, Ken, as we go into this a little bit more, I just want to ask one or two more basic questions. Can somebody speak about the GI Bill and what that is?
I'd be happy to take that one. So the GI Bill started right after World War II as a way of allowing returning service members to attend college. The way it works today is the post 9/11 GI Bill is a little bit different than the original GI Bill in that now service members can transfer their benefits to their children if they want, as long as they have accrued enough service time, active duty service time, and as long as they do it while they're in the military. And then there is the Yellow Ribbon program, which works like this. The GI Bill covers the first $27,130 of a college education. Generally, that covers you at a state school. If you're a private institution, you could choose to do the university can decide if they want to be a yellow ribbon school, which means that whatever is over that $27,000 cap, the university and the VA splits that amount so that the student doesn't have any tuition or fees. And so it gets tricky because some universities will put a cap on the number of yellow ribbons students that they'll take, or they'll say, we'll participate in yellow ribbon up until a certain amount over that cap. So there's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of it's very confusing. Even for me, when I started working more heavily at Fordham, I would go on the VA's website and see how I would understand it, not knowing anything. And it's very confusing. So you should always really check with your university to see if they are a yellow ribbon. You know, if their tuition is over what the cap is, see if they are, and what does that specifically mean for that school.
Andy, real quickly, majority of my students, I would say 90-something% are going to school in Boca Rehab.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What's your experience with that as far as, you know, the differentiation and such?
Yep. That to me is the best kept secret of VA education benefits, because most of the time service members who are disabled don't understand what it is. And if you have a service-connected disability, and most veterans, they get a rating. So you could be 10%, have a disability rating of 10% for tinnitus, or you could be at 100% for multiple conditions. So generally, if you're over 60%, you can go to the VA and say, because of my disability, I'm having trouble getting a job. It's billed as a education program. And you say, this is the job that I want. the job that's posted says you need at least a bachelor's, let's say in cybersecurity. So you meet with the VA and set a plan. And if you get approved, you will have your tuition paid for, tuition and fees, just like the yellow ribbon, except the sometimes they get more time than they would on with their VA general GI Bill benefits. And, processing it wise, it really seems to work out to be the same. And people who are really savvy use their VRNE for their undergraduate degree, and then they could save their GI Bill for the grad program. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, yeah, that's great. Thank you.
I'll chime in and say we are seeing in our census data that we do every year, more and more folks using the VRNE benefit. And we're seeing more graduate degrees. So people understanding better about how do I take this benefit that I have and use it in the most optimal way, right? How do I stack these things together to get the most out of it, which is a great thing to be able to do. So the more that we can help folks use that benefit to their advantage, I think the more they'll be able to get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
The one distinguishing characteristic I want to make is GI Bill is an education benefit. VRNE is a rehabilitation benefit. And so they are distinct benefits that veterans have. And I think that's where some confusion lies as well. And so getting the information out that this VRNE, which used to be called Voc Rehab, which I will probably always call Voc Rehab, but VRNE now, is a great opportunity for our veterans. The problem is, and we struggle with this sometimes with our VNR students, is that it's because it's rehabilitation, it has to be part of your plan to become employed.
Right.
So if you want to get a history degree and there's no jobs that help support you with a history degree, you cannot get a history degree, which is different than the post 9/11 GI Bill. You can basically pursue whatever degree you want. So
That's right.
that your rehabilitation plan has to include and make you employable, and the degree can be I'm going to say forced, that's not the right word, negotiated, with what that looks like. So obviously a social worker is going to require a master's degree. VRNE will pay up through that master's degree program, whereas most VRNE programs will not pay through master's degree unless it's required for the employment that is part of that program.
Right.
So I think it's a great benefit. One of the other benefits I want to mention, because for our student population, we're in access education, right? We're about 96% online. Our average age is 38 for our military affiliated veteran population. Only about 25% of our veterans use GI Bill benefits. So we have other students using something called New York State Veteran Tuition Award, which is definitely a hidden secret within New York State. It pays undergraduate tuition for New York State tuition, which is $295 a credit right now. So if they were to go to Fordham, they would still use that benefit, but it would only pay $295 towards Fordham. So it's another benefit out there for our students who may not be eligible for GI Bill benefits, which we definitely have a pocket of peacetime veterans or students because they were in National Guard, never got federal service, did not accrue enough time to be eligible for GI Bill benefits, that don't have that benefit, but potentially they will. And currently, here's a plug, there's legislation out there right now to open up the VTA, the Veteran Tuition Award, for all veterans in New York State, not just combat veterans, which would be a huge initiative, especially for the population that I serve with an older generation. That benefit, the Veteran Tuition Award, goes all the way back to Vietnam veterans. And we do have a lot of our veterans who are in different eras that are able to use that benefit. So I want to make sure that that doesn't get lost, because I think there's an assumption that all of our veterans have some kind of education benefit, and that is not necessarily true. There are certainly resources out there, and we need to make sure that we are guiding them in that direction so that they can seek out, whether it be VRNE, whether it be the GI Bill, getting them to an advocate and help them determine what's the best benefit for them to use right now. And then, of course, the Veteran Tuition Award.
Right. There's also a scholarship that the VA offers for people, civilian people who want to pursue a master's in social work, where the VA will pay for that, and sort of as repayment, you would work for the VA as a social worker once you have your degree. So that's worth looking into as well. We send a lot of people who come to us with no benefits or exhausted benefits. We sometimes suggest that scholarship as well. But that New York State program would be great if they rolled it out even bigger.
Send a letter to your legislators.
All right, can we, we're gonna move on to maybe looking at some of the challenges or like the distinction points between, let's say somebody is working clinically with a veteran who, this isn't only for like education providers or academic faculty, but I know me as a clinician, like if I was working with a veteran and this was a journey they were on, certain needs would come up, right? So like the majority of our attendees are social workers, clinicians, therapists that work with veterans or want to work with veterans. So if you are working with someone who says like I'm enrolled in school or I'm looking to enroll in higher education, what are some needs that you could talk about as far as like challenges that they may have or expectations or things that may come up for them?
Well, one of the things that I think it's important that we all recognize is that our veteran and military are their own cultural group. So they have a shared language, a shared set of beliefs, a shared set of experience that they have gone through. Basic training could just be called indoctrination because that's what it is. They're teaching us. I'm saying us because I am one of them, as well as Tim and Melanie, and I'm sure there's veterans on the call as well. They teach you to react without thinking in certain ways. And so this is part of being in the military. I've been out of the military almost 15 years. I could still like spit off the NCO Creed or the Soldier's Creed or things like this because it's been ingrained into me that well from my time in the military. What that creates, though, is that you have this group of people who have their own sense of culture, and it's sort of the if you know group where they're not free and able to speak about their military experiences, whether it's a peacetime experience or a combat time experience, with those who do not share that same cultural group or cultural identifier. When I met Tim the other day, he was talking about being at Fort Benning, and I was like, I was stationed at Fort Benning, and we were both in the Army, so we have like shared experiences. We've never met each other before. There's almost 500,000 people that are currently active duty in the Army. But Tim and I have similar experiences because we both just happen to have been in the Army and we're stationed at the same place, which is Fort Benning. He was infantry, I was engineer. Obviously, that makes me much smarter than him. So I shouldn't say that because he's a doctor and I'm not yet. Okay. So one of the other challenges for veterans entering into higher education is sort of communication. We in the military are coming from very strict, sort of clear-cut, subordinate, superior hierarchy. We're in higher education, it's much more democratic or laissez-faire type of leadership style where people are expecting you to take the initiative or kind of do something like this. So your students can have challenges when they don't explicitly understand what is expected of them in their coursework. And this could, create issues and anger. And one thing about veterans is they're very direct for the most part. And so they're going to speak to you and they don't want you to, like a normal civilian where you kind of have to sandwich it, right? We all know what's in the middle. It's the bad part. Just give them the bad part. Just give them the feedback straight and direct to them. And they're going to be much more open and receptive to that. Because I've had drill sergeants call me names that, there's nothing a civilian in higher education could ever say to me that would hurt my feelings more than what some drill sergeant had said to me when I was 18 years old in basic training. You can't hurt my feelings more than they have, okay? They made me feel really bad because they were building me back up. They had to break me down first. But that's one of the things that I've seen in my 15 years of working in higher education with our veteran population is the communication issues that they're having, and then just having a general understanding of sort of that military veteran culture, which is a hidden cultural group, because anybody can be a veteran. You can't just look at somebody and know that they're a veteran or not. And so they have sort of this, hidden language and things like that. I still have the same haircut that I had when I got out of the Army. And so people automatically know when they meet me that I'm still in the Army. So, okay, I'll stop. Let somebody else go.
Can I just piggyback on that and certainly not throw any stones here? Yes, I imagine your ASVAB scores were much higher than mine. And engineers are smarter than a lot of us. But I was also part of this other kind of freak, you know, as far as being, I was an infantry scout. We're the freaks within our own battalions and companies, right? We're always somewhere else. So anyway, so being an outsider, so coming back to this idea of being an outsider, right? Going off what you're saying, and just I appreciate everything that you said. Yeah, this idea that we were indoctrinated, we were institutionalized, and there's variations in that based on the branch, our MOSs, our jobs, right? That there are variations in that, but still there's a lot of commonalities that, you know, we continue to relate to each other around as veterans. And when we go back to school, guess what? We like to, well, not all of us. I mean, some people just, and I know I did this for myself for, you know, when I first entered college, is that I became a non-identifying veteran. I hadn't worked through a lot of my stuff, my service related stuff. I'm saying that for social workers because we call stuff, is that so, you know, with that is that, which can be very dangerous for a lot of us, but also it can be very protective and healthy too, as we continue to reintegrate, but then, and continue to develop as human beings, as whole human beings, coming from this really intense indoctrination that sticks with us no matter what, most of us throughout the rest of our lives to some degree, right? Our identities, especially when they get us young, 18, 17, you know, that it's formidable. So anyway, so come in is that, yeah, we feel like we're outsiders. We don't, you know, as far as there's cultural divides, depending on our service background, but even generally our service experiences, it can feel really surreal to be around a lot of people who can never relate to us, and vice versa. Yet part of education is that there's communities, right? There's community learning and engaging and a lot of socializing, is that we are challenged to engage in new and different ways. Again, that can be really hard, but it can also be very healthy too, you know, speaking as a clinician. But, you know, there's a lot of bumps. We oftentimes disappear or drop out for a while, right? Not all of us, but many of us do, who are still struggling. And so those supports, which we're going to talk about more here, and especially with a lot of these great panelists who do that work directly, is that to be able to have that support, people to get us, even if they don't know firsthand, but that they get us, and that they're going to be able to get to know us as much as we can, of course, as much as veterans are willing to disclose. So we don't want to pressure them, but yeah, there's huge divides. You know, I think, again, you know, the coming in is that we're not, I just want to reemphasize, we're not just veterans. And how do we support people in being able to re-socialize and in these diverse environments, and being able to be challenged, and to also become independent thinkers and operate and at least function independently, because part of our indoctrination is that we're told what to do all the time, right? And so with that, that's another big kind of mental, or I would say developmental kind of challenge for a lot of us. You know, engineers, they're, you know, again, MOSs and based upon our you know, our branch, that can vary too. Classrooms, I didn't see many classrooms when I was in the military. You know, I came out, my job was to kill people. I was trained just to kill people. That is something that was very difficult to figure out. Okay, so what is my identity if I'm not just a killer? Right. And that's not just, and I'm not, that can be many MOSs too, based on our experiences and what we, you know, deployments and such. So there's the internal stuff, there's the cultural stuff that's part of that, and then there's just this whole thing of adapting and re-socializing, and the supports are really important, and it's nice to be able to have other veterans. And I can say that for myself, as well as, you know, my role now with a lot of veteran students, is that if we can have people in key positions, of course, within veteran service organizations on campuses, but also in our departments, who are going to try to adapt and understand us based upon our unique identity and unique experiences coming into that. We're not just your usual student, right? All kinds of reasons. Anyway, I'll stop.
I'll throw out real quick. One of the things that we have found is that if you're going to pick another student group that you could compare student veterans to, the group that compares most similarly, demographically, culturally, success rates, things like that, is international students. So that goes to that point of it being such a different culture. Right? You're coming from a different place, even if you're not literally coming from a different place, it is a different place culturally and mindset wise. You're coming into a university that's not built for post-traditional, non-traditional, older students, which is what, like we said, most of our student veterans are. So being able to navigate the system that's not necessarily designed for you seems to be a real difficulty. So finding those groups who can help you, one, navigate that, just understanding just the ways that you get around in a place like that, and then finding folks to have that shared belonging with is super huge, right? So I'll plug the SVA chapters, right? That's a great way. It's not the only way to do it, but it is a great way to build in some of that shared belonging, shared experience that can help people navigate that system a little bit more efficiently.
First, I actually want to thank Tim and Josiah, because I think the vulnerability of being able to speak about your experiences is really important for people learning. And the cultural competency piece is huge, which obviously Josiah is working on with the Green Zone training. And there are a couple of pieces that I think are really important for us who have not had those life experiences, right? Is that the culture, obviously you can see there's a camaraderie between Josiah and Tim already, just because they served, right? They're also both Army.
You got shit talk. You got to shit talk.
Right, exactly. And I love it. I love that. I mean, I have 3/4 of my staff are veterans, so we get it. We get it every day. Sometimes I'm like, okay, enough already. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is it's so important and so necessary. So the Army has a culture. Navy is, every service has a different mission, which I'm bringing us up to, umbrella pieces for people who have maybe not worked with service members. Every service has a different mission. Right. So Army has a very specific ground force mission. Marines has a ground force mission. Navy, Coast Guard, and Air Force have very different missions. But the reality is there's still that camaraderie amongst our members. And not all of our service members are soldiers, right? Our Army veterans are soldiers, whereas our Marines are Marines, always a Marine, once always Marine, right? And we have sailors. So I think language is really important when you're starting to work with our veteran community. And it doesn't mean that you have to be an expert. It just means that you're aware of the fact that there is differences between the cultural responsibilities and the missions of our service, of our services. And that, let's just say, God forbid, one of them was not in the Army, they were in some other service, this camaraderie would still exist, right? And so they would pick on each other. But the reality is, if you tried to pick on them, then it would be a completely different scenario, right? They would have their backs up against each other and they would be. And I think that is so powerful, and why it's so important for us to build community and connect our veterans, because so many of our veterans are not willing, as both have mentioned, hiding their identity and what they have experienced or what they've had to do within their work for the military to keep us safe here in this country, is that we have to find a safe space so that they feel comfortable to be able to get them the resources that they need. So that if they do want to go back to school, they have those resources. If they need that mental health support, that they have those avenues. But if we can't get them to identify, which I know is a problem with some of our students, because they didn't go to combat, they might not identify as a veteran. Women especially are not as likely to identify as a veteran. And so we have challenges and obstacles to overcome, but providing a safe space that allows them the opportunity to disclose at their own time and space is really important for us. But I just wanted to make sure that the mission is very different amongst our services, and the being aware, just not calling every veteran that you meet a soldier is super important too. It's not a disrespect per se, but it's just being aware that there is a cultural competency piece amongst our services as well.
That's right. I just wanted, somebody in the chat had mentioned the PROVE program. It's a program for social workers where they get trained in military culture and just get a primer. We have 2 social work interns, PROVE interns in our office. And one commonality, you know, we're talking about differences between the branches, but one commonality that we see is that they're reluctant to ask for help. And in all the branches, you know, that you have to solve your own problems and not show any weakness. And one thing that we'll see the PROVE interns doing, or just our staff, is if somebody's not looking right, if they look like they've lost weight, or they come in and they look a little scruffy, you know, just asking, like, did you sleep last night? Where are you sleeping? Did you eat enough? Do you need some food? You know, it's very hard to suss out food insecurity or somebody who's couch surfing. And it's just trying to be as observant as possible so that if they're not going to ask for help, you could still get them the help they need.
So I think I know there's probably more thoughts on this, but a lot of you reference like self-identification, right? And obviously the cultural differences. And can you speak to, because I think there's a huge area of like mistranslation is when a veteran doesn't self-identify up front, yet they have needs related to being a veteran and their military background. And those needs might come up later, or the identification may come up later. And clinicians might get confused by that or say, well, I didn't know, or I didn't understand. Can you just speak to why? Because I think there's a lot of reasons why a vet may not just raise their hand up front and say, hey, you know, I served in the Army or the Navy, or, you know, like they may not come forward right away. The big one, the glaring one, is like they're working on this next chapter and the focal point might not be their military experience, right? They're moving on to a different experience. Are there other reasons or layers that a veteran may not self-identify up front? And what can institutions maybe do to encourage bridging that gap?
There's all kinds of reasons. I've over the years come across a lot of different reasons. You know, I speak for myself, but I can say that what's a common factor that it gets into one of the primary challenges for veterans during their service is that we talk about trauma a lot, and there's all different forms of trauma, right? There's types of trauma, and that a lot of people come out not only based upon what they participated in or what they experienced with this idea with dissonance, right? And there's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of and especially, you know, for people who have served in combat, you know, moral injury is a thing. It's huge, and it's one, and with it comes there's a lot of shame, right? And so, you know, and that, of course, that combined with kind of traditional PTSD and certainly survivor guilt, and sometimes they're all clustered together, right? So you know, again, there's the dissonance, and kind of there's a shame about what we did, and again, not feeling what anyone would ever relate with some really surreal experiences we have, either if you've been in combat, but even if you're not in combat, you've never been in combat, is that being in the military is just generally very surreal, but at least in hindsight, but then also when it comes to unique experiences that can happen when you're in, how you're mistreated. There's a lot of room for arbitrary type of treatment of people, mistreatment of people. Of course, there's lots of, the military does a good job, not only culturally, but also culturally also, but just institutionally in traumatizing people, be it you know, sexually, culturally, ethnically. Racism is huge in the military, continues to be. It's well documented. So, you know, there's a lot of things that really kind of put, you know, hinder our a sense of pride. I'm just saying our generally, you know, I'm not speaking specifically for myself too, but I'm just saying there's a lot of these experiences that just when we come out, we just sometimes we want to run away from, or we want to just kind of disconnect from and move forward. But then stuff catches up to us too.
Any
If
other
you
thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
if you think about military movies, think about a couple of military movies. I'll list off a couple because I like them, but also my wife hates watching them with me because I always correct everything that's going on in the movies. But Black Hawk Down, Casualties of War, Full Metal Jacket, Platoon, Fury, American Sniper, Hurt Locker, any of those types of films. They're engaging, they're exciting, but they're involved with 0.1% of the military. So what the general public is seeing is what a tiny, tiny percentage of the military does. So 99% of the military do something that it's just a regular job. A lot of times it's boring. And so when you identify yourself as a veteran, and this happened to me early on, I would say, yeah, I'm a veteran. And then they would go, oh, how many people have you killed? And that is when I was like 23, 24, that's really hard. Sometimes I'd tell them and then but later on I realized it does it make me less of a veteran if I haven't? And then that really people started thinking about what they were asking me. But this is one of the reasons that people are afraid to identify themselves as a veteran. Because they don't necessarily know if it's a safe space to be a veteran. They don't know if they're going to be attacked, or people are going to automatically assume that they're super conservative, or that they love guns, or they're a member of the NRA or something like this because they served in the military. The entire political spectrum is in the military. All sorts of beliefs are in the military. So, but people sort of caricaturize the military personnel into thinking people are gun-toting conservatives or something just because they're in the military. That's not true. Another reason that veterans don't necessarily say that they're a deficit or say that they're a veteran is there's this thing called deficit mindset. And I'm sure you guys all know this. But sometimes when a veteran comes out and they say, I'm a veteran, people automatically assume that there's something that they're broken or there's something wrong with them, which is not always the case, right? Yes, 35% of veterans have thought about committing suicide at one time in their life, but that also means 65% never have, right? But we automatically jump to the 35%, right? Or we think, oh, they're a veteran, they have PTSD, or we got to get them to disability support services, they're a veteran, or something like this. And so they don't want to be your token veteran. They don't want to have to represent an entire group of people. And so it's easier just to be, I'm just a regular non-traditional student. Because then, if they make mistakes, they're feeling like, oh, now they're going to think everybody, whoever was in the Army, is kind of dumb or something like that. And they don't want that pressure on them. And so that's, I've had people that I'm also, in addition to being the lead instructor at Green Zone Allied Training, I'm the director of veteran services at the University of Baltimore. We have over 200 veteran and military affiliated students. I've had students that were here for 3 years before I finally met them, and they actually came to our veteran center and they just said, I didn't want people to know I was a veteran. So that's why I just did everything via email with you guys and never came to Veterans Day or any of the programming you did, because I'm afraid they'll look at me differently. And so that's some of the reasons that that I've seen in my experience.
May
right.
I hop in?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So everything that you all have said, completely accurate, 100% agree. Just one really quick thing I wanted to
Wait,
add.
Melanie, is that you? Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's Kat. Sorry.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey.
One thing I
Yeah.
wanted to add is just from the lens of women veterans. Recently, I had the honor to go through the Women Veteran Leadership Program that was originally hosted by the Mission Continues, now is going to be taken over by a new organization known as Beneath the Service. And as women veterans, first off, an incredible experience where you get together about 70 women veterans and we are all looking around and it's just, wow. It's the only time many of us have been in the room of people with just women veterans before. And as we spoke, many of our stories are the same, and a lot of them mention is, I don't want to identify as a veteran, because they look at me and they're like, you're a woman, you're not a veteran. And I see head nods on in here, just emphasizing that point. We absolutely do not, because you walk in the VA and they'll say, oh, are you a dependent? Are you somebody's spouse? And one of the women that I had the honor of just being in her presence, let me tell you, said, at this rate, I'm about to go to the VA with a sparkly, glittery t-shirt that says, I am the veteran, in all caps, just because so many individuals, especially our older women veterans, are not wanting to identify as veterans more, just because people won't believe them. Or a lot of women veterans suffered from MSTs, and that identification of veteran it hurts them, really. It cuts to their core. And so that's just another thing I like everyone to keep in mind. Many of us who suffered MSTs and other just really not so great service, especially our women and even minority veterans, I have found if you did not have a great time in service, they don't like to also identify either, and they will stray as far away as possible. So that's one of the things I talk to my SVA chapter advisors and chapter members when they're asking, how do we recruit? I say, change your language to, are you a veteran, to, have you served in the military in any capacity? Or has anyone in your family served in the service or any capacity? Do you have any connection to the military? Because while we may not say, I am a veteran, we may say, oh yeah, I was in the Guard for 6 years or something like that. Or I was a reservist for a little bit, but I'm not a veteran. I never deployed or things like that. So thank you.
I think it goes back to the idea too, that language is important, the way that we frame things, the way that we ask. And with the goal of wanting to support, like I know I'm a clinician. I've always worked in inpatient healthcare settings. And if you ask straightforward, anyone, veteran, civilian, any client seeking services, have you experienced trauma? It's such a direct way of asking about something that could be a sensitive topic for that person, versus saying, like, have you ever served in a high risk situation? Have you ever been involved in like natural disaster? Have you ever worked frontline? Those are different ways to kind of assess where somebody's coming from. And Kat, thank you. I think it's such a great point, and you made it so well. There was a comment, I thought it was Melanie talking before, because Melanie made a comment before about distrust in institution. And that's something that comes up too for people of service, and it's important to recognize. So these are all just like recognition areas, not to assume that every veteran has this list of reasons or issues or whatever you want to call it, but they could, right? So these are like consideration points. And I think they're being really well made. So before moving on, I want to just ask, does anyone else have ideas on this topic of, apprehension, or like why a veteran might be hold back, even after self-identification, why someone might hold back information about their service? Anything else come to mind?
I'll add from personal experience. My husband's a pilot, was deployed for 2 years, not as a pilot. And his job was very different. Deployed with the Army. So he's in the Navy, deployed with the Army. And so when he came back, because of his job in the Navy, he did not disclose what it is that he experienced over there. So although he needed support because it was going to impact his job, he did not seek support. And so I think that that's very common for some of our veterans who are currently serving. Things have changed a little bit. But when you have certain jobs, you lose them if there is any, and in some instances you should. My husband is very good at compartmentalizing, which allowed him to continue flying without any issue and with no concern. And thank God, we are blessed, and he was able to turn the corner. And different person, I think, is something you always have to remember, is that anybody who has experienced that type of life phenomenon is a different person. And that's something for you to think about when you're supporting a military family member as well, right? So there's a very high divorce rate within military families. And there's a reason for it, because people are different. The spouse is different when you come home, as well as the military member is different when they come home. And so I think it's really, really, I think one of the other pieces is what I wanted to say is that depending on what the job is, there is opportunity for people not to identify or seek out support, which is, I think, one of the questions here. Obviously, once they're out of the military, that's one thing, but there is still some concerns and issues when people are still in the military, and trying to seek support and get them the identification of what they need. And we support about 300 active duty Guard and Reserve here, in addition to our veteran population. And so that's something that we always have to be aware of, in trying to at least identify the students being deployed, what are the resources that are necessary, and making sure that they are at least connected. And we have to be careful how we present that information, right? We just have to be available. We have to make resources available and then hope that they will take advantage of the resources when they come back.
Can I pop in, Aynisa? Hi, I'm Melanie Curran. I'm on the VMHTI committee that puts these together. I'm a Marine Corps vet, and I think it's really important when you're I worked in peer support for several years, and it's really important when you're helping a vet and they're thinking about going back to school. That can be so intimidating. A lot of vets don't love paperwork. They don't love institutions. There's a lot of, there can be a lot of paranoia, a lot of imposter syndrome. I know, if you're a veteran, you've faced a lot of imposter syndrome. And then when you start putting on intersectionalities, right? Female MST survivor, maybe I've worked with many veterans that have been hazed for a specific identifier, their religion or their race, their sexuality. They're carrying that baggage. So I think some of the most beautiful things someone that's working with a vet can do is hold space for that. And the nice thing is, on this panel, everyone here is uniquely working to support the vets that are facing those things as they come into these institutions. So I just really want to point out that it is being in school can be difficult, but even bridging the gap to apply. I know vets that have, someone in the comments was just talking about they have a veteran that has applied for voc rehab, which is an education program that will leverage schooling, several times and got rejected. It can feel insurmountable to deal with the idea of engaging with an institution, engaging with your own imposter syndrome, not knowing if you're good enough to be a vet, not knowing if you're good enough to be an academic, needing to be around other vets, the logistics of getting into school between the housing, the paperwork, the commute, again, all with those things Aynisa said about paying the bills. So I just, education can be life-changing. And I know Mark probably has some data on that, on how higher education can change the trajectory of veterans' lives. And I just want to say that the work everyone here is doing is really crucial for that. Yeah, sorry.
No, sorry. We appreciate it. Any other comments on this? I have a couple other questions I can move into also. All right. Well, you're all fantastic. Again, we appreciate it. The levels of insight here on this topic are really needed. So I want to ask more about like your experience with resource centers, veteran resource centers. I know they're pretty big in college institutions, but right before that, I just want to ask, based on your experience, and this is more for the veterans who've been in school in higher ed. What's like a big takeaway for you from what you went through? It could be good, bad, or indifferent, but like what's a big 2020 kind of hindsight takeaway that you can just provide for us today? I wish I had more of XYZ, or this was great, fantastic, really, hit the mark. What does anything come to mind on either end of the spectrum?
I wish that my biggest thing is I wish there would have been the SVA when I was in college was just starting. When did SVA start? 2009? 2000, yeah, around there. Well, I started college in 2009. So SVA was just in its infancy. I actually, at my last semester of college, at my community college, started an SVA chapter at Carroll Community College, Westminster, Maryland. I'm out of Maryland. I'm not a New Yorker. Sorry, guys. And so, but then I moved on to my four-year school, which was even smaller than my community college. And I think there was 3 veterans at the whole institution. And I chose that school because of the degree program and the major and the number of students in the class, not thinking about how much I was going to miss the camaraderie and the kinship and that sort of thing when I was there. And the whole time I was at my second institution, which had a smaller veteran population, I was like, now I'm just the weird old guy on campus. I was all of like 26 also. I was very young, handsome at the time. But I felt like the old guy on campus because I'm taking classes with 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds. And it was a very liberal college, so I would tell people I'm a veteran, and they would look at me like I had a third eye popping out of my forehead because they would assume all the things that I had said previously. And the only person on campus that was designated to do anything for veterans was the school certifying official, but there was no SVA, there was no veterans lounge, there was nothing like that. And so like Tim had said, and I said before, I had to completely just shut off my veteran identity, which had been every day of my life for 6 years. I was in the Army for 6 years. I did 2 deployments to Iraq. I spent almost 30 months of those 6 years in Iraq. And all of a sudden, if I talk about that, now I'm like weird. I'm already an outsider because I'm old, but then if I'm a veteran on top of that. And so I just wish that there would have been a place or SVA was more established at that time, or I would have made a better choice to go to an institution that had more veterans, because I never really found my community for my junior and senior year of college. And it made my last 2 years of higher education not very enjoyable.
Thank you, Josiah. Who are you calling out right now?
Do you need more vet lived experience, Aynisa? Is that what this is?
Yeah.
I will, the question was about what was the question?
A big takeaway, positive, negative, indifferent, just like as a veteran student, I wish there was more of this, or this was really great for me, either one or both.
The thing that I've met a few other female vets and just vets in general that like they're creatives. So I'm a writer. I've worked with vets that are, also filmmakers. I'm a member of Veterans in Media Entertainment. And I think when a lot of times people go to school, if they're not in the STEM pre-law, if they're not in like a crunchy business sort of space, because veterans are very good at hooking up anyone who's studying cybersecurity and economics and doing like crunchy stuff. But if you're a veteran and you're in this like nebulous humanities space, it can be a little bit jarring. So I kind of wish there was more of an intersection between veterans and art, because I definitely felt when I went for creative writing that when I was in those creative writing spaces, I was really enjoying myself, but there were, exactly what Mark said, right? Like there was almost a international level type of cultural dissonance, and I felt things got lost in translation. It was hard to do accommodations. I mean, I had to go to a teacher at one point and say, this piece that I have to critique, I can't critique because this is a piece about sexual assault, and I'm having too much baggage associated with my military experience. Like, I need guidance. And she tried her best, but she had no clue how to accommodate. And I saw, like, I would see the teachers work very hard to celebrate younger, more traditional students. So I guess it's a question of, are there spaces that can align with what the vet wants to do in the world, why they're at school, that also celebrates that identity of them being a veteran. So I guess that's what I'd like to see more of. It's a little bit of a niche thing, but there's a lot of vets that it's not that they don't necessarily self-disclose. It's like their interest is not necessarily an interest that's heavily embraced by the vet community, or the interest that they have is not intersecting with vets in a way that they're accommodated. And maybe Kat also has a comment as a female vet. And that's another weird thing, just so everyone knows, female is like it's an adjective. This is my English degree just failing, but female goes with veteran. So like when we describe ourselves, female vet is accurate, but if you just say female by itself, it's a little like icky. So I say women vet, which isn't like, that's not correct at all. But it makes me feel more like a person. And then like some people don't understand that little nuance. So you walk around and people will be like, the females, and you're like, oh, this is why I don't like being a female vet or a woman vet in male spaces or general vet spaces. Like they try so hard and accidentally getting like, we have female dogs. Like it's just, it can be like the cultural between female veterans, male veterans can be big. And then you have all these layers. So yeah.
I found more of a acceptance with using women veterans, because that tends to be more inclusive, especially for veterans who are LGBTQ and maybe like our trans women veterans. And I want to hold space for them, and I want them to feel included as well, for surezies. But one of my experience, so I went through, well, I took 10 years to get a bachelor's degree, but that's beside the point. I think that's there was a lot of back and forth. It's fine. But one of the things that I really did struggle with, especially coming back from basic training, is really figuring out where I wanted to go with it. I knew that I liked my job. I was an optometry technician, but I don't think I wanted to become an optometrist. That sounded like too much school, and I was a little intimidated by that. So I was like, well, what else sounds cool? And I picked some sort of random arbitrary major. And I realized very quickly, no, that had way too much math. No, thank you, goodbye. And so one of the things I would have loved to have, and I think something that we at SVA have been hearing from very many student veterans, is I wish I knew what to do with XYZ major, or what of my skills in the military can transfer over to a career, or things like that. Like, where can I go to explore these things? And that is something that I would have loved. And it might have saved me several years when I was going for that bachelor's degree. And I think, Josiah, you were saying something about just having that support of, I now went to a school that now suddenly had 3 veterans, and I'm the weird old guy in the classroom. I mean, I was the weird old chick in my classrooms as well. I was 28 when I graduated, and I'm looking at all these people like I have a whole life that I have lived, that I got in arguments with some of my classmates when it came to certain things just because of the experiences I had. And so one of the great new tools, I know Mark was going to mention it, but I'm going to steal his thunder from him, is that SVA recently unveiled a new super awesome tool that we call Apex. It is through our Academic Advising Center. We recognize that a lot of student veterans are first generation college student. And so Apex, our Academic Advising Center, really was our way to bridge this gap and be that missing guidance counselor, because if many of us are first gen college students, we may not have the resources and understanding of what we needed to do to apply to school, and also choose the school with the majors or just the community and everything that is best suited for us. So Apex is a really awesome way where you can pop in your MOS and take a lot of the soft skills and be like, oh yes, I have all of these skills, add it to a profile. You can also take a personality test and say, hey, this is what I'm interested in. So for people like, Melanie, who are really more artsy and geared towards that, be like, all right, well, that's going to take that into account. We're going to take into account the fact that you did XYZ in the Marines, put that together, and it can say, hey, this might be a list of majors that might be of interest to you, or this might be a list of careers that could be of interest to you. That through Apex, you can explore institutions all throughout the continental United States and even some international institutions. It has what degrees are offered at that institution, which is really cool. It even also has, once you can also add any additional education experience that you have too, and it will also take that into account within your Apex profile. Because once you have all of these things built and you say, okay, this is where I'm going to go to school, or this is something that I'm looking at, we also have success coaches that you can go maybe bounce ideas off of, or, hey, I don't understand how to do XYZ when it comes to this application. What the heck are they talking about here? And SVA has experts that have worked in veteran higher education specifically to help you with, oh yeah, that's what this means. This is the sort of thing that you're going to want. And I see that you're really interested in this kind of field and you're trying to pick between these schools. Maybe go research these sections and let's come back and talk about it in their one-on-one coaching sessions they have. Finally, we also have and yes, I will send all of the details for Apex. I already got them written out. They'll be posted in the chat, don't worry. And then from there, we also have, once you've got all of your information filled out, we have a career board specifically tailored for our student veterans and military connected community, spouses, dependents, caregivers, and survivors, that corporations have specifically said, we want to hire people from this community. It takes into account that skills. They see your profile and it'll say, oh, hey, this is a job that really aligns to your skills. Or this is a job that really aligns to your interest, but maybe your skills aren't there. So this is something that you're going to need to do in order to get your skills up to make you a competitive person for that job. It does also have some really, really cool aspects like, oh, hey, I see that you want to be an outreach coordinator, if you will, and this is what outreach coordinators are. Your median salary is in XYZ location too. So you can adjust it through locations and say that's a job that you want. You can save it to your favorites page and things like that. And if a job is available at an organization, you can actually go right into that job that a company posted. Like, let's say, I don't know, Lowe's, for some reason. Lowe's has a really cool job that you want to, and you're like, oh, hey, I have the skills and I'm kind of interested in it. The job is posted. You can go right there and you can apply through the job right through Apex. So our team is doing a lot of really great work with that. I will be posting all of the details as well. And yeah, it's just fantastic. And it's really a lot of Apex really came true thanks to Mark and his team for providing just such an incredible amount of research to help us pitch these causes, to helping other organizations kind of get involved with SVA some more and help them out. So mad props to Mark.
Geez, there's so much to say, but I guess just the idea of how we find our way into doing something meaningful, right? Is in how do we get that support? And that's something I advocate a lot. And from my own experience of coming from a deeply conservative background out west, and then going into a deeply conservative institution, and then coming out and just thinking, well, okay, I'll work for a security contractor for a bit, and that'll be my job. But everything was feeling soulless. And so yearning to kind of to make a difference. And I think a lot of us are inclined in that way for, pre-service, for all kinds of reasons, and some people, for various reasons, think we can think very differently, right? Neurodiversity is really important. But I went in thinking, well, let me do microbiology because it's interesting. I was a special ed, first gen college, special ed kid all through high school and everything. What was I doing there when I couldn't even do barely pass pre-algebra? So, but the liberal arts education, being exposed to the various types of disciplines and such, it can be really enriching. And I know for a lot of the veteran students that I work with now that are more inclined for social work for whatever reason, still, that discovering those paths and what's meaningful is the purpose of a liberal arts education, of just being exposed to a lot of different ideas, right? And possibilities, not only when it comes to our careers or jobs, but it's something a little bit more deeper and meaningful for us, that if we can tie something that based on our values and what we want to, what kind of role we want to play in society and interpersonally with people, is that you know, I chose psychology and sociology because it was interesting. And yeah, you can't do a lot with those degrees unless you go to graduate school. That was a quick lesson, right? So a challenge to take that next step eventually, but getting there as someone who was not a good student, and you know, but really finding, again, the exposure to different ideas, right? Outside of my very narrow kind of, and I'm not, some of my best friends and family members are conservative still. Okay. So I'm just saying that, you know, that path, again, that what is the exposure that we're not, you know, that we can do something meaningful in our life. If being an accountant, I know someone's accountant that it's really meaningful and interesting for them, not for me, but that's good for them, right? Because they can do important work for other people too. So I don't want to be a social work snob, but you know, I think how do we support that discovery and that exposure beyond, you know, just kind of like, well, robotically, I'm going to follow the STEM track because that's where higher ed, that's where what's prioritized in higher ed now, right? Because the economy and all this stuff. But you know, if you can still kind of get more diverse, if you can develop critical thinking skills, critical self-reflection, all those pieces which are counter to what the military, how the military indoctrinates us, to disrupt that will make us more whole people in the world and in our careers. So that's just my plug for that stuff.
And I like that a lot of you keep bringing it back to this idea of higher purpose and the importance of that, which kind of goes back to the idea of expectation, right? And some student veterans' frustrations stemming from frustration due to the fact that, you know, their expectation is high. Like what they want out of the experience is, there's a high standard attached to it. And that may not be the same for their counterparts in school. Some of them will have that, and some may not. So I think it's good to be mindful of that, and it's helpful. So probably have time for maybe like one more question. So I just want to ask, experience with veteran resource centers on campus, or any support that's been set up on campus, whether you work there, you're an advocate, you're a veteran, what are some of the highlights that you might say, like, hey, this exists, like this is out there, what direction can you point someone in? I know a couple veterans I've spoken to, like there were supports in place, but they were not aware of them. And then when they were like, oh, this is great. The room's a little small, but I was able to get this out of it, right? Is there something that you could offer as far as information in that direction?
I would, because this, I think one of the let's go back to the self-identification first, right? So we have a question on our application: have you ever served in the US military? So if they self-identify at that point, they would come to our office, at the time office. However, they could completely circumvent our office as well, right? For most military offices, unless they're using funding, there's no hard stop for a veteran military office. And in many cases, a lot of institutions are using funding as a way to identify students versus identifying students who are not using funding. And so for us, a vast majority of our students are not using funding. So that is not a stopping point for those students to ever engage with our office. So in this last year, we launched the Veteran and Military Resource Center, and we also made some changes to the upfront, I'm going to call it's a student funnel for us, upfront part of the funnel, where they have to work really, really hard if they identify on the application as a military member to circumvent our office. And I don't mean that they're intentionally trying to circumvent our office. It's just that there was no way for them to officially stop, even though we did outreach to students that identified. They didn't have to respond, and because there's so many other things that they're doing, it's very challenging in that part of the funnel. And for us, we support over 1,000 military affiliated students. So we want to make sure that each member is supported as well, right? So we have veterans coming in, we have active duty guard and reserve. That's all different funding that they're potentially using. And then we have our spouses and dependent, which by the way, is our largest growing population using transferred benefits. And so that is something from a higher education institution is another piece of it, is that you have for us, a younger generation of students who have lived a military life. My daughter is one of them. She's 20 years old. She knows no life beyond having her dad deploy every year. And so I think that is important to acknowledge within a higher education, is that we have a lot of family members coming back as well using those transferred benefits. So I think from a resource center is actually helping our veterans engage with the center, and we've made some significant changes so that we are much more proactive. We have now in the last 6 months been able to get our SVA club up and running. We've tried multiple times over many years. I'm talking 10 years, probably at different times, but we want it to be student driven, not administration driven. And so that takes veterans who want to engage in that way. Going back to what you initially said, Aynisa, most of our students have families. They are working full time, then they're going to school, and then you add another commitment on top of that, can be very difficult, but that camaraderie is so important. So I think for us, the identification for identifying as a resource center, and the change for us is not just about resources within our institution. It's also about connecting our students to resources within the community, and also being a space that we have community organizations coming in that are not just for our students and our alumni. So this space is going to start being used by the base because they need some space that they don't have on location. Boots to Business has been here, right? So our students are invited to that, but we have community members coming in and veteran community members. So a resource center to me is a larger than just the institutional resources. It's about that connection to and engaging with and ensuring our students have the resources that they need that might not be, right? We have New York State Department of Veteran Services here on site. A lot of veterans still don't want to go to New York State Department of Veteran Services or VA. So what are their other options? What other resources can they use in the community that are available to them to help connect them, and then hopefully eventually get them to the VA, even if it's just health insurance, right? That they need moving forward, and making sure they have their educational benefits. So I think it's just a larger umbrella. At least it has been for us. It's a larger umbrella for us to be able to better support from a community perspective, not just an education perspective.
We've done some research on, and continue to do research on, institutional factors and institutional policies that help support student veterans. And one of the things that we've found has the most impact is the idea of a single point of contact for kind of these resources. And that doesn't necessarily mean like one person on a campus has to be the single point of contact, but having a resource center that, if I'm a student veteran, whether I'm identifying or not, I'm a dependent, I'm a family member, whatever I might be, I can go to that place, I can ask my question, I can seek out a resource, and those folks are going to help me navigate that process. When we do things like this for campus administration, for folks that work in resource centers, or folks that are just on campus generally, we tell them the best way to get a response or engagement from these students is to be safe, one, or be a place where they can come and ask a question and not feel like they're going to get judged and have all this baggage attached to their stuff. So be safe, and also be useful, right? Have useful resources that you can give them. Be the kind of folks who can walk them down the hall to the registrar and say, here is my student veteran friend who came to me for help. I'm handing them off to you now, right? Rather than just say, give this person a call and then never check up on it. So we find if that resource center is a safe place and a useful place, you're going to be able to get more engagement, and that engagement can then translate into more success for that student veteran and your general student veteran population.
Just to add on to that, we have federal work study students that work at our vet center. And that helps a lot too, because they'll go in and there's somebody who has literally been through the same experience that the person coming in is having a question on. Or if they just want to hang out, you instantly find that connection that got separated when you separated from the military. So it's just a great place. Also, having food there helps a lot, because that someone might come in to get an egg sandwich and then they come out with a friend, or they come out with a resource, or they get a little nudge to go to that, veteran internship fair. And having a resource center like that really helps to just have the personal touch to really help them feel connected and get access to all the different resources that are available to them.
All right, so there were some great comments, feedback points, a couple of kind of questions that came in interspersed through. But yeah, a lot of people just appreciating some of the information that you all gave. And I'm trying to think as a last question. I have a couple others written down that we didn't get to, but some of the points you made, and that's why I love how these go, because sometimes unexpected points come up. And I just like how, I think it was Tim, it might not have been Tim, but somebody referred to the hidden culture. Josiah, it might have been you, I'm sorry. The hidden culture that's kind of embedded in there. And I just think that the cultural competency aspect is so important, even though it again might not be on the forefront. I think that's like a huge point that everyone made today that was really important. Tim, one of the comments you made was, we're not just veterans. I think maybe our last point can be around that. And we only have a few minutes left, but can you just speak to to humanize this a little bit more too? Because I think all of you referenced taking the stigma out of the question of what a veteran is, student veteran, female, woman veteran, right? Taking the stigma out of it though. You're more than just a veteran, right? So somebody who's seeking higher education, it's easier almost. It's almost the easy button to say, oh, you're a veteran. Great. So now we can fill in all the blanks around what that means and what you need. Well, you might also have, family and or social, sexuality, ethnicity, geography, other components of yourself that play into what it means to seek higher education and a career. So can you speak to that a little bit as our last point?
Yeah, and just kind of spark it, but not take up too much space, is that yeah, the beauty and complexity of intersectionality, right? Is really the crux of this. And yes, because of I keep this institutionalization, and through the type of indoctrination that we are subjected to and endure and internalize, is a lot of times that it closes us off for all kinds of reasons. Because guess what? This could just apply to the Army or other branches too. We're not all green, okay? Because what that means, I can say within, especially the largest branch, the Army, is that we're all green. That speaks to the idea of assimilation. And that we are assimilated to that. Yes, I think there's a camaraderie and a sense of solidarity within that serves us being, united in being mission ready. Yet we're not all green. Guess it's what it comes critically. If you want to come from a more radical perspective, is what it means is that we're all supposed to be pretty much like white people. The institution is based on whiteness and white supremacy. And I'm not, and not just saying about racism, tied to racism too, but that we assimilate to dominant norms of US society. And people are forced to do that. And so we, a lot of times, we have to put aside, all our various cultural and ethnic types of identities so that we can assimilate into being all green, i.e. code for white, which is the critical perspective. So anyway, so the intersectional piece is that, yeah, a lot of us have to overcome some of that too when we come out and find and rediscover or discover for the first time really who we are as integrated human beings, because that's what it comes down to.
I want to cut in and say that I always thought Tim was really smart. And then after I knew him for like 8 months, he casually was like, yeah, I have a PhD in social justice studies. And like, you know, I've been doing all this activism. I'm like, so Tim's really humble, but I'm really glad we have him on the committee. And on that note, I wanted to just let everyone know that these VMHTI panels are put together by a committee of vets that advise Niswanis on topics and development. So I just dropped in the chat. If a lot of people were super excited sharing about Apex, Kat shared about Apex, people were sharing about Prove, people were sharing, I think someone, Kathleen Downs, was sharing about how proud she was of the collaboration between like her vet center and her disabilities office. So if you have something you want to present to the panel, that the committee that informs these panels, feel free to email me. We'll get you, you know, brought in to present to the committee that helps develop these panels. So I really wanted to make sure that was out there. Sorry, Aynisa, I don't know if I jumped in too soon. We have 5 more minutes, so.
Any other comments about being more than a veteran and the life areas that you might want to just prioritize?
I think that the one thing that's really cool about being a vet, because I'm with Tim, not all vets want to self-identify. A lot of us want to go under the radar. But the cool thing about vets is it's an opportunity to build rapport with another human being lightning fast because of our shared background. Doesn't mean we're all going to get along, does not mean we're all the same, but it's an opportunity to transcend a lot of those boundaries, those identities, not to ignore them. They're still there, but veteran culture is very good at teaching people to be in community and hold space for those differences. And then of course, when, sometimes it just doesn't go so right and we can feel that, it's conforming. So there's, a really great side of veteran culture that just is wonderful. And there can be that problematic side when people don't feel seen.
My veteran identity is not the guy that wears the hat that says OIF veteran with like all the pins on it or anything. And I don't go to my local American Legion. I am a lifetime member of the VFW, but I haven't been there since I signed up to be a lifetime member of the VFW. I am first a father to my 3 kids, a husband to my wife who's too good to me, like a son to middle-class parents that I was a rebel and enlisted in the Army from, an educator, and then like 5th or 6th on that list of who I am as a person is veteran. And so, when we look at who we are as people, you have to realize that for Tim, being a veteran might be 10th place, but for Grandpa Bob, who wears his Vietnam vet hat, being a veteran is the #1 thing, right? So that's just something to keep in mind, is being a veteran is very different depending on who you are.
One of the things I've seen also just in my own experiences is that while we're going to school, we also want to be students. That's why when we talk about student veterans, student is the first part of that statement, student veteran. And so giving them and letting them feel that it is okay, that they can explore other avenues of their identity. Yes, you can come into the vet center. I promise, we're not all, as one of my coworkers like to say, sitting around a table, eating crayons and grunting at each other. We are all of these dramatically different, diverse and beautiful people. And some of us are highly involved in our Black student union. Some of us are in a sorority, calling myself out there. I was a sorority girl and the oldest in Greek life, but giving them that permission, because sometimes when you are so locked into that vet identity too, it feels hard to be able to embrace these other aspects of your identity. I found that for many of our vets, because you get so shoehorned into that early. So just giving them space to be that, whether they are you know, maybe they're Jewish, maybe they're Muslim, maybe they are, you know, they're Black veterans, they're Asian veterans, they're LGBTQ veterans, or, you know, they're vets that just really, really like video games and they want to go join that board game and gaming society club on campus. They're students too. Let them be students and have that really great, and let them enjoy that student experience as well. And that's something that we love to just welcome here at SVA too.
Aynisa, did you want to wrap it, or do we want Amelia to come up and talk about the link and the survey one more time?
I think anyone else with, I know there were some like questions and comments, and we try to message people on the side as well. But if you had a lingering question or comment, please tune in for future NASW events. And yes, that's a good cue to, and I'm sorry if we didn't get, I tried to scan as we were going through. I'm sorry if there was anyone with a burning question that we didn't address on the panel or as a side comment. But we do try to get to everybody, and we appreciate the attendees for their participation and for rolling in with such great comments and questions throughout. Our panelists, of course, are amazing. We can't do this without all of you. This is the bread and butter of everything that we do as part of this initiative. So thank you, Melanie and Amelia, for setting these up, and to our panelists for all of the information that you provided. So yes, we can send it over to Amelia. I know she just dropped, or Melanie just put in the chat box some information. Amelia, if you want to just talk about the CEUs one more time, and NASW, we'll turn it back over.
Awesome. So thank you, Aynisa. Thank you, all of our panelists, all of our advisory team members. Thank you, Melanie, so much for all the support you've given this initiative while I've been on maternity leave. So I hope everyone's able to look into the chat box and see all the gratitude that's being sent your way. I'm just going to close this real quick with the admin items for CEs. So in order to receive your...
Amelia, can we also tell them about next month, September 5th,
Yes.
There is a Veterans in the Workplace panel. So we have 3 more panels for this year coming up next month. We have the Veterans in the Workplace panel, which this talked heavily about education. Next month, we are doing a focus on employment. And then the month after that, we have 2 panels set up for veterans as clinicians. So veteran military family who work as clinicians or in a healthcare space. And then we have veterans as patients. So those are the panels coming up for the year. So please stay tuned. Sorry, Amelia.
No, that's okay. Those are important things. So when it comes to CEs, you must have attended the entirety of this training, which great job. And then you must complete an evaluation by this upcoming Friday, which is August 16th. I've thrown that evaluation link into the chat box several times if you just want to click and jump in and do that right now. Otherwise, it will come to the email that you registered with. It's going to take about 10 minutes to get to your email. Zoom has to do its thing, email has to do its thing, so it might take a beat, but it will come to you. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions. You'll receive your CE certificate within 10 business days of this program as a downloadable PDF to the email that you registered with. It will be PDF because if you are ever required to submit it to NYSED, they will need it as a PDF. So beyond that, just thank you everyone for participating today and attending. Thank you all of our panelists. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Aynisa, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.